Hey everyone, welcome back to another video in the Athlete Mobility Blueprint. So in this video I'm going to go a little deeper into why mobility is so important and where it fits in with the rest of your training and your life. So CrossFit created a pyramid called the hierarchical development of athletes. So on the base of their pyramid they have nutrition. Above nutrition we have metabolic conditioning, so that's basically your fitness across different time domains. So we have our aerobic system for longer duration, and then we have anaerobic and creatine phosphate system for those shorter duration. So basically your conditioning. Then we have gymnastics, so body weight movements, learning how to control our body in space. So we have things like push-ups, pull-ups, air squats, handstands. Then we have weightlifting, so any exercise with an external object. So we have barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, wall balls, that's all weightlifting. And then at the top we have sport. So sport is the most complex and it builds upon the foundation beneath it. Because in sports it's very unpredictable. Whereas with weightlifting and gymnastics, the environment is more controlled. Sport, you're playing against other human beings and you're reacting to the bounce of a ball or how another person is moving. So yeah, sport is the most complicated. Now I think that CrossFit left out an important part of that pyramid, and that is mobility. The reason I think mobility needs to go in between this bottom layer and metabolic conditioning is because without mobility, we can't do any of this stuff. So even with the metabolic conditioning, so say we want to run or we want to row or we want to swim, if our joints don't have the mobility for that, we can't do it. There's a saying within the mobility community that you can't move where you can't move. And it's obviously a self-evident statement, but basically what it means is if you're missing a certain range of motion, you're simply not going to be able to perform certain movements. So let's take for example a shoulder press. And let's take an athlete who has really limited shoulder flexion. So I ask them to lift their arm overhead and they get to here. If I ask them to then perform a shoulder press, they're either not going to be able to do that or another joint is going to have to compensate. And with this particular restriction, that often becomes the spine. So I'm pressing the bar up, but my shoulders can only get to here, and now I'm leaning back. And that can place a lot of stress on our back if it's not prepared for that. Similarly with gymnastics, if I'm asking someone to perform a kipping pull-up, but they don't have any extension in their back, and then I'm asking them to try and create an arch shape on a pull-up bar, you can't move where you can't move. So mobility has to come before all these other things. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't train within our current range of motion in these other things. So let's take that athlete with the limited shoulder flexion. I can have them do an incline bench press. So now we're working within their capacities, so it's safe for them to do that, and we're building strength, but we're also just respecting the capacity of their joints. So, but the important thing is, if you've got things that you want to achieve up here, then you have to address this at the same time. So some of you guys like weightlifting. I think, yeah, all of you guys lift weights. And say we're performing a squat. If we don't have a certain amount of hip external and internal rotation and hip flexion, when we go into that squat, similar to the shoulder, other joints can compensate. So you might notice your back is rounding, or you might notice you're coming up onto the ball of your foot rather than staying planted. So in that situation, we need to maybe not squat to full depth because our joints just don't have that capacity yet. So squat to a depth where we have that mobility, work on this at the same time, and eventually we're going to be able to increase that capacity and squat lower and lower. So I hope that illustrates for you guys how important mobility is and why we need to work on it and maintain it throughout our life if we want to keep doing all these activities above. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave that in the Mastermind channel in Slack, and I will see you next video.